What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we're going to be talking about another UDFA signing Lions made this offseason. And today, we're talking about a cornerback out of Kansas State. We really haven't dove into the cornerback position. We've kind of sporadically been doing these videos. Actually, the initial plan today was to do a video on Jerry Jacobs out of Arkansas. And that video will be coming soon. I just didn't feel like I had enough information yet. But he has such an interesting story. He opted out last year. And he's like, man, I 1,000% regret that. And he also said, hey, if you need me to lock down DeAndre Hopkins, I'll do that. So I need to do a video on that guy. But today we're going to be talking about the other corner the Lions signed this offseason. They gave him some guaranteed money, and that was A.J. Parker. So let's get it started.
Way up, we're going to bite a kneecap off, and we're going to stand up, and then it's going to take 2 more shots to knock us down. And on the way up, we're going to take your other kneecap, and we're going to get up, and then it's going to take 3 shots to get us down. And when we do, we're going to take another hunk out of you. Before long, we're going to be the last one standing.
All right, now before we get into this video too far, I first want to say happy 4th of July. I think that's when this video is going to come out. Hopefully you guys had a great 4th of July if you're seeing this later, but happy 4th of July. Also, I got to give a shout out to the dudes at Cedar Point that said what's up. I was at Cedar Point today. There was a couple people that were like, hey, that was awesome. It really was pretty surreal to have that happen. So I appreciate y'all. Thank you. You know who you are. Hopefully you're watching this video because that would be pretty cool. But shout out to you guys. I appreciate it, man. The energy is awesome around this team. I'm excited for this season. And I know you're like, why are you here? I'm sorry. I'm kind of like back and forth with this video. But we're talking some A.J. Parker, and I think you guys are going to like this one. So let's get it started. Oh, wait. We already did that? Okay. Happy 4th of July again. Welcome everybody to a video. Glad you guys are here. Yes, we're talking about a UDFA sign. Like I said, sporadically, we've been kind of doing these, kind of working our way through it. We have a couple more players to go through for sure. And it's kind of tough to find film on some of these guys. I have enough to do this video. I was kind of struggling with it with Jerry Jacobs because I find myself watching full games, which is really tough to kind of find, okay, and look for things because, you know, they cut like half the screen because you can't see the whole field. It's really tough, but I think we have enough to do this video. And A.J. Parker is one of those guys that I feel like is a dark horse to make the roster. It's tough to make a roster as a UDFA. It's a really difficult thing to do. But one thing that is going the right way for A.J. Parker is that he did get $35,000 guaranteed by the Detroit Lions. Now, it's not the most. Remember, McKinley, I think it was $100,000 that he got. But it is guaranteed money. So the Lions felt good enough about it to give him some guaranteed money to get him to come to Detroit in the first place. And now that he is here, I think he may have enough traits where the Lions give him a shot on this year's roster. It's going to be tough, but maybe as the final cornerback. Maybe. We'll get into why. But let's talk about him a little bit. This is a 5'11", 183-pound cornerback out of Kansas State playing in the Big 12. I know that's definitely on the slimmer side, and that's a very important factor, which we'll get into because Jerry Jacobs is not like that at all. But he's definitely on the slimmer side, and you can see it with the eye test. However, he has had a lot of experience. That's for sure. He started the last 3 years for Kansas State. He started off in 2017 through 2019 as an outside cornerback. 80% of his snaps were coming at outside cornerback, which is very impressive. He became a starter in 2018. Then they pushed him to nickel corner in 2020, 77% of the time. And I was wondering to myself, why would you push a guy from outside to nickel? Like, what would be the point behind that? Lost their cornerback, who was their main nickel, who transferred away. What was his name? I think it was Walter Neal. Yeah, Walter Neal. He transferred away. So I guess they pushed A.J. Parker to that nickel cornerback position, which is a very tough ask because it's very different from outside cornerback, okay? To go from a guy that's played mostly at outside corner, sure, he's dabbled at the other spots, but 80% of the time he's on the outside, to go inside is a very tough transition. However, showing that he was able to do it at a pretty high level, it's very important. I think that's what the Lions probably really liked about him. Plus, he has that special teams ability, which really carries over because that's where you're going to start as a young guy anyway. Last season, 40 total tackles, 1 interception, 4 pass defended. But what you notice when you look at all these numbers combined, you can see there's a pretty good amount of interceptions, and it's not a bad amount of passes defended either. Yes, he's a pretty much a ball hawk in the back end. I'm assuming I put that somewhere in the thumbnail or the title, just knowing how I do things. I probably put ball hawk somewhere. He is a playmaker. He's opportunistic in the back end. That is for sure. Plus, they did play a pretty good amount of zone, especially towards the end of his career. So that also helps a little bit as well. 2020, he would be the extra DB on the field. So if the Lions are going to a 2-4-5 in their nickel sets a lot of the time, it's going to be very similar for him going to the Detroit Lions. I think you always look for guys that are going to transition quickly because they fit what you're trying to do. And I think A.J. Parker definitely does that. Plus, because, like I said, they gave him that guaranteed money. Take away from these combine numbers, though, is that he does definitely have a build for a nickel cornerback when you consider his size, when you consider his arm length being about 30 inches, which is very undersized for a lot of outside corners. Usually they're pushing 32, 33. So he's definitely has the size and the build that you'd want for a nickel corner at the next level. The issue is that you can see by the speed numbers, those aren't that great. And usually when you're playing that nickel spot, it's not all about the long end speed, which he has. He has kind of the speed for an outside corner, but he also has a size for a nickel corner. And that's what makes him a weird kind of tweener. However, on the field, it doesn't show up as often. If you didn't know those numbers, you probably wouldn't know that just from watching his film alone, because on film, he does things really well. And he's a very smooth player, very fluid, so he looks a lot quicker than maybe he actually is. Plus, his aggressiveness, which leads to opportunities. But man, this guy just has a feel for making plays in the back end. So let's dive into the tape a little bit. I got a lot of things that I want to discuss here. Let's start with man coverage first, then we'll get into a little bit of zone coverage, then we'll talk about run defense, blitzing, all that kind of stuff. But let's talk about him in man coverage. And this is more focused on 2018 through 2019, 2017, because those years they played a lot more man coverage, it seemed. And he was also playing the outside cornerback position. When he moved to nickel, it seemed like they played a lot more zone coverage. So we'll talk about that a little bit more from the nickel spot. But when we're talking about man coverage, and this is a really impressive thing to do, to be able to play outside cornerback and transition to nickel and be successful there is a really tough ask. It's one thing to say you're versatile, it's another thing to prove it. And to prove it throughout a season. Not one game, injury came up, I had to step in for a couple plays. You did it throughout a season. That's extremely impressive. I mean, from 80% outside to all of a sudden you're playing basically 80% at the nickel. That is a really tough transition because they are very different responsibilities as a defensive back. But in man-to-man coverage, there is a lot to like here, but there's also some concerns for sure. All right, so let's start off at that release. So off the release, he plays with his feet, not with his hands. That's what I like about it. You really got to defend with your feet. If you're trying to defend with your hands, you're gonna lose your guy. They're gonna go by you. You're gonna get pushed off. You're gonna lose your balance.
Here's a really good example. One-on-one coverage on an island. Notice how he mirrors the receiver. Watch his feet match the receiver's feet. Also, he stays square to the line of scrimmage, stays very balanced for either direction. And as soon as he breaks right here, A.J. Parker breaks as well, breaks on this pass. If it was there, he would have been in position to make a play.
Not super aggressive off the snap when he's pressing. However, he plays with his feet, so he can stick in front of you with his feet. And that's the biggest thing, is his feet. His footwork, he's so smooth. His back pedal is pretty. He's a very, very fluid coverage guy that can just stick in your pocket. And that's one of the toughest things, I think, for young cornerbacks, is that transition of being able to stick with guys out of breaks, through routes, because they may have the speed, they may have the length, but can they stick with them through all the zigzags, because there's some tremendous route runners at the next level. And I think that's actually his best aspect. Now, what he may lack is some of that explosion out of breaks, some of that burst out of breaks. So there could be a little gap there for potential separation. I don't doubt that, but he moves really well with his feet, so he can really stick with guys. I feel like that he was very aware of what matchups that he had, and he was against all type matchups, big receivers, small receivers, fast receivers, slow receivers. He went against all of them, with Kansas State for years, especially at the outside cornerback position. It's not like they took him off the field. He just had to adjust, he had to adapt, he had to play differently based on who he was going against. A.J. Parker, he went against the best, and he played extremely well at the outside cornerback spot. Personally, I like this film at outside corner better than I liked it at nickel, and that's probably because nickel was a new transition for him. He only did it in 2020. He was playing outside cornerback for 3 years. So when it came to 2019 playing outside cornerback, this guy was locked solid on the outside. Watch him against Oklahoma. He goes against CeeDee Lamb. Really doesn't allow anything all game. He allows like one reception where he actually tipped the ball up in the air and he caught it behind him. They actually beat Oklahoma in that game. He had a pick six in that game. He was fantastic. Dude can absolutely cover on the outside. He played such a good game against CeeDee Lamb. It kind of showed you what his ceiling could actually be as a cornerback and just how sound he could actually play. But yet he gave up more against Jonathan Adams, and I think the big knock for him is simply just going to be size. And we're going to talk about that a few times, but size is the biggest knocks. But you line him up against a guy that's not going to, out physical him, then all of a sudden he's going to make it a really long day for anybody that lines up across him. And we saw that he didn't get that kind of attention, but he can definitely play, and he could follow around your top receiver, which is impressive. The most fun part about him in coverage, specifically man coverage, but also in zone coverage, is the way that he just has a natural feel for being an opportunistic cornerback. And this comes up in multiple ways. He understands when he gets his head around. He gets his head turned around. He's up there to make a play on the football really well in zone coverage. But in man coverage, he just has a really good feel on positioning.
All right, beautiful rep here, 1st and 10. He's not getting physical, but he is sort of pressing. But just notice the footwork. Okay, he doesn't flip his hips and run until the receiver comes out of his break there. Then he gets his hand on the receiver. Now, nothing to, warrant a flag, but it's the break right here. Skirt, he's able to step on the brakes, same time the receiver does, then get himself in position where if the quarterback throws that, he's taken off the other way.
He does that really well. He just has a great feel for when routes are breaking. It's like he's a receiver. He just has a tremendous feel for that. I love that also in man coverage.
I'm hoping this is one of those plays that the Lions look like next season, but they're going to blitz here 3rd and 5. They're basically just playing the sticks, but it's man coverage. You can see the pressure getting into his face, but notice that in route breaking underneath, and he just jumps on it. He just jumps underneath, jumps right in the spot to get that interception. Getting in his face, quarterback can't see, so he just throws to the spot, and you could see A.J. Parker with his head up. He's able to just shoot down and make a play on the football.
Positioning is really everything, and I think we saw this the most against Jonathan Adams. Adams outsized him. A.J. Parker faced off against Jonathan Adams. What was impressive on its own is that they basically asked A.J. Parker to follow around Jonathan Adams wherever he went. It wasn't like height was the huge difference, because A.J. Parker is actually the average NFL cornerback height at 5'11", but where he lacks is a little bit of that build. All right, at 178, 182, he's definitely on the slimmer side. One of those areas where I think he could get a little bit stronger, and it could really help his game at the point of attack. But one thing that these, cornerbacks would do to combat these situations where it's just a simple jump ball in the end zone is they would throw him off the route early. One of the ways to do that is the press. And for a guy like A.J. Parker, that's probably where he's the most raw to me, is press situations, because he moves really well with his feet, but he doesn't use his hands. He doesn't really fight players at the line of scrimmage. And I think some of that is the strength side of things, because he can be completely just pushed off in those situations. Also very technical, okay? If you land your strikes in the right spot, the right part of the chest, you can really throw off receivers' routes. And that's how you can throw off the timing, and you can really throw off the route and get yourself in a situation to not allow it to just be simply a jump ball to a guy that has 3 inches and 40 pounds on you. Now with the Detroit Lions, look, they're going to mix in a lot of zone coverages. A lot of those situations are going to simply just ask him to bail. But when they do want him to press, I think that's the one part of the game that's extremely raw. However, what he will do is he'll play through the body. So once that receiver brings it down to his body, he's going to punch that thing out. So he attacks through the body. I like the aggressiveness.
Another beautiful rep here. As usual, A.J. Parker gets his head turned around against CeeDee Lamb. But as you can see, the separation Lamb creates. So A.J. Parker just decides to go through the body instead of allowing him to just push off, and he's able to make a play on the football.
He was doing to basically combat that is he was just getting on top of every route. He would sit on top of it, he would leverage himself, and he'd make it a really tough pass. He'd throw off the timing. That's what he was doing extremely well. His positioning was fantastic.
AJ has really good positioning and man-to-man coverage here, and here's a great example against Jonathan Adams. So he's going to turn around pretty early here, but notice when Jonathan Adams turns his head, AJ does as well, and he gets himself in a position to make a play on the football.
Another very important part of man, as we talk about coming out of breaks, is also that long end speed. He doesn't have bad long end speed. It's not great. It's just okay in terms of his RAS score when you look at his 40. A lot of the little things to make himself look much quicker than the numbers would say.
Plays like this interest the Lions. You're going to get a cover 2 look, split safety look, so that means underneath routes are going to be there. So he gets himself in a position to take away the initial slant. Now, he flows with the football. The ball was really never going to go there, but he stays with the play, sticks with it. He flows with the quarterback's eyes, working down the field. Then when the pass comes back, he just puts himself in a position where he could potentially make a play. And there he is, being opportunistic. That's a game changer.
The zone experience. Ton of zone experience, and that's huge. Jerry Jacobs, same thing. They played more zone than man by far, but he played a lot of zone as well, specifically in that last year from the nickel spot. But the zone experience is going to be huge for him transitioning next season. It really kind of enhances his best quality, and that is, just the playmaking in the back end, the opportunistic, jumping on routes, making breaks. He's got a tremendous feel for breaks on routes, shooting down on things, making plays. The only issue I see here is that he can get a little bit, tempt him to throw it. Once he throws it, then he'll jump down. He's going to try to make a play on it. However, sometimes he can give a little bit too much space, a little bit too comfortable, and all of a sudden he gets up a big gain because he thought he could recover to that spot.
Now, I personally have no issue with this play because it makes A.J. Parker who A.J. Parker is. It makes him opportunistic. Instinctually, reads the quarterback's eyes, jumps on this out of a soft zone coverage. Now, a lot of times you want to say, okay, break down, just tackle the receiver, focus on the ball carrier. But for him, this is how he makes his plays, right? He anticipates, he sees the quarterback, so he jumps on it. And sometimes there's risks that comes with that. But see how he fights back into play? At least he fought back into play. It does turn into a first down, but sometimes there's some give and take.
Another issue that I did notice in zone coverage specifically is that he can get a little bit flat-footed. Of course, you're usually just watching the quarterbacks. You're kind of flowing with the quarterback's eyes, and then you take the routes that cross your face. For him, he can lose routes occasionally, but he can get a little bit flat-footed, watching the backfield, watching the quarterback. Can be a little bit late to react to certain routes. And like I said, at nickel in 2020, he played a lot more zone coverage. Follows the quarterback's eyes well. He gets himself in position where he can go make a play. He could see 2 receivers at once. However, zone does bring the good out of him as well, because he is a very opportunistic. He has great breaks, and he is very aggressive. He's not going to sit back and wait on things. If he feels like he could jump down and make a play, he's going to do it. But he's always got his head on the quarterback. Like I said, he turns his head around when he's running in man-to-man coverage, which is just awesome to see from a guy that young. But in zone, he's always watching the quarterback. That's where you see him making a lot of plays, because he'll break off of routes, really baits guys, and we've seen it. A lot of his interceptions, he's baiting guys. He's making them feel like they have a lot of room. All of a sudden, as soon as they throw it, he shoots down on things and he attacks. Sometimes he gives us a little bit too much space and he can actually recover from, but he does have that kind of mentality that you need from his own corner to be a playmaker in the back end. And that's the kind of corner that I think the Lions want. They want playmakers in the secondary, and he is a playmaker for sure. He'll make some plays.
Here's a really nice example from the outside cornerback position to slide over to the seam route, get an interception. And what you notice here is he's just watching the quarterback's eyes the entire time, and he slides off and makes a play.
Other parts of his game, which is like the tackling, the sacks, things like that, this is where you have a little bit more concerns, I would say, because his size shows up for sure here. As a tackler, he brings the aggressive nature to attack blocks. He'll attack blockers downfield. He'll attack receivers. One issue that he does have, though, with his size, and I would say a lot of corners probably have the same issue as well, especially nickel corners, is that simply he is outsized. So when they use him on blitz, which is good that he has experience, because I believe Capers and Aaron Glenn, they're going to use him cornerback blitzes because of 4-2-5, 2-4-5, is going to open up a lot of the opportunities to blitz your corner. And he's done that a ton. So is Jerry Jacobs, but he's done that a ton, and he's good at it. He avoids blockers well. The issue is if a blocker gets his hand on him, he's pushed completely out of the play. Issue with receivers as well. While he's aggressive, some receivers can just simply just push him on the ground. Jonathan Adams ran this guy over. Okay, tackler. The issue is because of his build, he has to tackle around the legs, around the ankles. So because of that, it leaves him very susceptible to hurdles. So he can have a lot of those situations where he's kind of diving and jumping for the legs, and they'll just kind of hop over it. So that's one issue that he can have. Because of his size, he can't go high on guys. He knows he has to get low. He shoots down like a missile, like a rocket to attack, but his size is an issue. If he gets anywhere high, they can just shrug him off. It's hard for him to bring guys down from really the waist up. It's really tough for him to do that from the waist up. Also, another issue is that he's so aggressive as a tackler when he shoots down, is that sometimes he can completely get himself out of spots, overrun plays, take bad angles, not get himself in a position where he can really break down and wrap up. So on those certain occasions, he'll just completely whiff and guys can run by.
Now, I love his eagerness for sure, but this is a 3rd and 3. You would like to see him be a little more patient here, break down a little bit, and focus on really trying to set the edge. You can see he just attacks down right away, and he takes the wrong ball carrier, and he gives up a first down.
So as a tackler, there's good and there's also bad. Some of it's that you just can't teach. I think there could be some patience added to it, but in an aggressive and attacking defense where they want him to get downhill, he's going to fit that because he will lay some big hits. I think, though, one thing that he could improve on is just breaking down more consistently. If you can build a little more strength, add a little bit more to that, you could see a higher tackle percentage.
Playing that nickel cornerback position when he slides into the box to set the edge, really just attacking the outside of a tackle. And this is something that Jerry Jacobs does extremely well. Jerry Jacobs has the ability to be an outside corner. He was an outside corner at Arkansas that played a lot of zone, and we'll do a video on him soon. But Jerry Jacobs has a build to do this, and he understood it as well. Attack the outside of the tackle, force a play back inside to the linebackers, to the big guys. You want to just force things back in. And A.J. Parker has that understanding as well. The only thing for A.J. Parker is that he can come in a little bit out of control. Parker is that he really sells out, and that can lead to being a little bit out of control in terms of breaking down and making a tackle. You know, he can sell out, so in a read option, sometimes he'll take the wrong option. He'll make a big hit, but the guy doesn't even get the football because he really sells out. That's one of those spots you like to see him be a little more patient as a tackler, break down a little bit more, and I think that's something that special teams work will actually help him with. It'll help refine his tackling because that's one part of the game where he'll be much more cleaned up and polished. You simply have to love the mindset to not want to sit back and allow guys to push him out of the play. You know, he wants to get out there. He wants to make a play in the backfield, and he's aggressive with it. It's just he could be a little bit more cleaned up here, but you love the mindset.
Overall, A.J. Parker is a guy I really like. I love the mentality that he brings. I love the experience playing nickel and outside. That is a valuable, very valuable trait to have.
This is the final question of where would his role be with the Detroit Lions if hypothetically he made the team. So with a guy like A.J. Parker, I think his role early would be special teams, like pretty much any UDFA you bring in. Usually they play on special teams early because it's a place for them to develop and kind of work their way up the roster through practice. So that would be his early role. And the good thing about A.J. Parker is that he's proven to us he can play at special teams and play there at a pretty high level. He's made plays in the special teams game. He's had the block punts. One area where I think he could definitely use some polishing is
tackling, finding more consistency there, and playing on special teams is actually a spot that he could get much more consistent as a tackler. So I can see that translating from special teams to defense. So I'd actually think that'd be a really good stepping stone for him to get a lot of special teams reps with the Detroit Lions, getting those opportunities early. Now, when you talk about where would he be used defensively, well, he would be at the bottom of the depth chart, I would believe. Now, I actually do like him better on the outside than at nickel based on the film that I've seen. However, with that in mind, it probably has a lot to do with how much he's actually played at outside corner. He's had a lot more experience holding down that role. It's a transition for him to go to from outside cornerback to the nickel cornerback spot, but he may project better based on his size as a nickel corner for the Detroit Lions. Right now at 182 pounds, he just simply needs to get a little bit bigger, needs to get a little bit stronger. I mean, it's not a bad size. 5'11" is a pretty good height for a corner. You can play inside, you can play outside, but you look at what the Lions have at the cornerback position. When you look at Jerry Jacobs, but you look at all the other guys, you know, there's no one with that size that plays outside cornerback for the Detroit Lions. The only guy that's comparable in terms of size at 185 would be Corn Elder, and he's basically pigeonholed into the slot cornerback, nickel corner. Like, I think for a guy like AJ Parker, he just needs to get a little bit bigger, needs to get a little bit stronger if he wants to play more outside cornerback. But based on where he is now, I would say he'd probably best project as a nickel corner. However, he's played well on the outside. I see him being utilized in dime packages. He's shown to us he can be that extra defensive back. He can play on the field in those situations. He was able to do it back in college. Slide any inside and help in coverage, can drop in his zone or play man-to-man coverage in those situations. He's probably not going to be out on the field on short yardage situations where it definitely could be a run play. You'll probably go with other options. I think he'd be more of an obvious passing down type of option that you throw on the field that can occasionally blitz when you want to send him from that nickel spot. I think that's what his role would be for the Lions. And of course that could grow. Actually, like I said, I really liked him as an outside corner. What he did there against guys like CeeDee Lamb, some of the top competition, it was ridiculously impressive. But I just think because of his build, he probably best projects as a nickel. He could definitely play the outside cornerback position as well. He needs to be very day one ready as UDFA, which you don't see a ton. I'm not sure how high the upside is here, but I know that day one, I think that will really help him, and that's going to give him a very legitimate shot to make this roster as like the final cornerback on the team. Blocking punts, his approach, his experience, you know, starting for 3 straight seasons. He played in 20 consecutive games. One thing that is worth mentioning is he did have a fractured ankle at one point. It wasn't severe. This is a player that could definitely make the roster as a final corner. It's not going to be easy, but I wouldn't count him out. If AJ Parker makes the roster, don't be shocked because I think he's very day one ready. And like I said, I don't know how high the upside is here, but I could definitely see him make the spot because he can do a lot of different things. You can trust him in a lot of different areas, and he's going to be ready to go. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you, Pride, for watching. He got $35,000 guaranteed. That's a really good step in the right direction, and I'm out.